the Godfather of Soul, James Brown, was a hard nut to work for, and guitarist Damon Wood knew that. But when he received a call in 1998 to drop everything and fly from the US to Greece to play lead guitar for a show that took place just 4 hours after he landed with no rehearsal, it was the start of a 7-year musical odyssey as one of the Soul Generals. It's become the subject of a book called Working for the Man, Playing in the Band, My Years with James Brown by Damon Wood. Delighted, nay, honoured to be joined live on the line by Damon Wood himself. Damon, good afternoon or good morning to you over there.
Good morning. Good evening for you.
Well, yeah, good afternoon. It's a beautiful Spanish sort of Friday afternoon here. We've definitely got that funky Friday feeling going on. Tell us a little bit about how you got into music and how on earth you ended up getting a phone call from the US to go to fly to Greece and play with the man himself.
Well, I had played in a band in Las Vegas, and one of the members of the band had a friend who was a backup singer for Mr. Brown, and her name is Tommy Ray, and she ended up marrying James Brown and has James Brown Jr., who is 17 years old, I think, now. So anyway, this short-lived band led to being able to play a show where I met James Brown, and he started managing a group around her, and eventually I got the call to go join his band in Europe. So I'd already known him. I already had a passport. I'd already been to Europe with Mr. Brown. But I got the call to join his group and was able to stay in the band after that.
I like the way that you refer to him as Mr. Brown, even though it's sort of, what are we now, 12 years after his passing? Was he that much of a figure?
Yeah, I'd say so. I think, I think my respect for him only grows over the years, I already respected him a lot before, but I think we say Mr. Brown even these days just out of that level of respect, I
mean, what was it when you got the call and you were, you got on the plane? Were you aware that you were going to be taking to the stage literally hours after you'd arrived with no rehearsal?
Yeah, I knew that, but it was just still a daunting task. And when I got to that show, there was no guitar players on the stage, and they were already doing sound check. So it was kind of a mad dash for people to try to explain to me, what I might be able to do here or there in the show to help it go along. There's parts that they're used to the guitar player doing. And, of course, it was kind of too much information to take in at once. I already knew a lot about the show. I'd seen the show many times, but to play the show was a completely different story. So,
I mean, you ever heard that nightmare where you're on stage and you can't find your guitar or you can't remember the chords? I mean, it must have been a bit like that.
Oh yes, I have. I still have that nightmare, and James Brown his show is still part of the nightmare. Like, I can't find my cables. Where's my guitar? I left it somewhere in the airport. All kind of things like that. I'm late. I'm seeing the band walk to the stage, but I'm 100 yards away. I had nightmares like that all the time when I was in his band.
And
and now sometimes I have dreams where I'm like, I get to go back and he's letting me play the show again, and it's really wild. It's like when you're in the band, you have nightmares about it. When you're out of the band, you have dreams where you're back in the in the show again, And
I mean,
crazy.
James Brown was well known for being a hard taskmaster, to put it mildly. He was the hardest working man in show business, and that wasn't some idle boast, was it? I mean, that was really, he was out there on stage pretty much every night of the week.
When he was on stage, he was moving every second. One time, our percussionist, Spike Neely, told me, he said, if you ever lose the groove, or you ever don't know where the beat is, or, where you should be, just watch his right foot, because it's always moving, and it's always on the beat. So that's how intense he was,
And also, the other thing about him was the fact that he may have been grooving and moving to the beat, but it wasn't a case of him not knowing what on earth was going on, because he was the conductor. He knew exactly what each musician should be doing. He could spot a missed note, a bum note, a missed chord, a missed beat, and he would find you on stage. Tell us a little bit more about that then.
Oh yeah, well he would find you on stage. So more in my day, it was more of a thing like, I gotcha. Keep it together. You missed something there. But back in the day, he would really, take people's money, and that would, solidify their desire to be more tight, and not miss anything. But he also had, behind him, he had the band split into 2 different rhythm sections, which gets talked about in the book through some of the band members and stuff. but he could literally just point his finger, not even looking at you, still looking directly at the audience. He could point his finger, and you'd know he was talking to you. And he could say, turn down, turn up, stop playing, whatever it might be. So, yeah, he was directing the band, like, at all times. And he had 2 different rhythm sections that he could, you know, lean to his right and point a finger at somebody, lean to his left, and he's got a completely different rhythm section that could stop or start at any time. And, you know, any members could be, you know, he might just think some guitar sounds, I don't like that tone right here. Why don't you go ahead and lay out for a second? And then he'd point you back in when the next part came or something. So, yeah, he could hear everything all the time.
And what was it like?
He didn't use floor monitors, so I think he could hear the band even better because of that.
Oh,
He didn't have
really?
his voice shooting at him. Yeah, he would just hear it from the room itself, from the big PA speakers, not from floor monitors.
Wow.
Which was very interesting.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, obviously he'd been touring since the 50s, and everybody remembers his live album, Live at the Apollo, which is an absolute must-have. So he'd been doing this for a very long time. What was it like being on the road, not on stage, but being on the road with James Brown? Did you see Mr. Brown very often? Was he away? Did he keep his finger on the pulse of what was being spent, what was going where? You know, did he keep you all in check?
Oh yeah, I think so. Yeah, you know, sometimes we get to, sometimes you didn't always want that interaction, you know, because you might be sort of ready to, you know, maybe talk about people's parts or, you know, say the band doesn't sound so great, because he would always be kind of trying to, well, make the show better, of course, but he'd always be trying to sort of pump the band up, but in a way that we might not get it. You know, like, it might seem like he was berating us or saying that we don't sound good. But, you know, it was always a trick of, like, I want you to sound really good tonight. So if you guys are a little bit, you know, if I upset you a little bit, you're going to come out there ready to kill them, you know. And so he would pump us up that way and sort of, you know, play little sort of tricks, like kind of mind tricks like that and stuff. But, yeah, he'd come around in the dressing room sometimes and tell jokes, and sometimes we just have a great time when he'd come around and hang out, you know.
So
sometimes it was real business, and sometimes it was a lot of fun.
It seems like he was being both good cop and bad cop when he wanted to be.
Oh yeah, definitely.
And he wasn't afraid to take a gig, no matter what the size or wherever it was. And apparently, in the book, and this is true, you played in Kuala Lumpur one day, and then 72 hours later, you were in Arkansas.
Right. True.
I mean, you must have been absolutely dead on your feet for that one, surely.
Yeah, you know, we always had time off. It wasn't like one of these world tours that these bands, you know, put out an album and go out for 8 months straight. You know, we never did that. I think the longest I ever did was about 5 weeks. Now, I know before I was in the band, they did some longer tours than that. But so, yeah, I mean, we would travel extensively, and we would go all over the world, you know, but we would always, after 4 or 5 weeks or so, you know, we'd get a couple, 2-3 weeks at home so you could kind of, you know, regenerate and, you know, get a break.
So why did you think that the time was right to write this book, Working for the Man, Playing in the Band? What inspired you to write this book? Because he died in 2006, didn't he, on Christmas Day, Mr. Brown. Why do you think it was the right time, and who did you speak to?
Well, the reason that this book project came up is because I also give guitar lessons. And I must mention the real writer of this book's name. This is Phil Carson. I gave Phil guitar lessons for a couple years, and you know, I tell people the stories, some of the funny stories from the James Brown days. And he's a writer, and he wrote a great book about Roy Buchanan, who was a great, somewhat unknown, fantastic American guitarist. And so Phil Carson wrote the definitive book on Roy Buchanan. It's called American Acts. So when I knew what a good writer that he was, and it was his idea to make his next book project, you know, my James Brown experience, and try to talk to a bunch of different band members and get a big perspective from the band, you know, and see what we could come up with. So it was Phil Carson's idea. We probably started this project probably about 2010 or 11, and all the interviews were done probably more than 5 years ago now. So this has been kind of a labor of love that's been a long time in the making, and we shopped it around, and we found a publisher, ECW Press from Toronto, and they've been really excellent. So we kind of it happened now because this is when it all got done, you know.
And I mean, how willing were people to actually... Sorry, how willing were people to actually talk to you about Mr. Brown, and also you share their experiences of life on the road, off the road, on stage and off stage?
I missed some of that. Could you tell me that again?
Yeah, how willing were people to actually speak to you about and share their memories of working with Mr. Brown?
Well, Phil called everybody and did interviews, you know, and he had specific questions he wanted to find out about, and he asked them, you know, what are some of your more interesting, you know, times that you can remember or stories that you have? And so Phil did all those interviews with the band members.
And, I mean, what was the final point when you decided to leave the band? Did you jump? Were you pushed? Had you had enough? I mean, you were with him for a long period of time. Did it just, you know, life on the road with him, was he such a demanding taskmaster that everybody had a sort of burnout point?
So you're asking about when I left?
Yeah, that's right, yeah.
Well, you know, things on the road, tensions rise, you know, and sometimes the same old things keep coming up, you know, and it kind of drives you crazy. And the sort of the breaking point for me was Mr. Brown fired Keith Jenkins, the other guitarist. And to me, I looked at it like this for a couple of years. Like, I felt like he stood up for the band in a lot of situations where somebody needed to stand up for the band. And, you know, I kind of felt like if he gets fired for some silly reason, that's probably my time to go, you know. And then Mr. Brown will have to figure out, without the two of us, how to continue, you know. And it was sort of just, you know, after it happened, it was kind of like, you know, I felt bad about it. I didn't want to go out that way. But, you know, the tensions of the road can really, I mean, after years and years of the same old things, you know, can really add up, and it becomes difficult just to do your job. So, you know, it was unfortunate the way I left the band, and I've always, you know, sort of felt bad about it. But, you know, like I say, those tensions can build, and when you can't, like, release the valve on that pressure rising, you know, things get kind of a little bit too intense.
What?
And that can happen, you know. That's probably why he had, you know, hundreds of band members, you know.
What was the, you know, I said he spent several years with the hardest working man in show business and making you the hardest working band in show business. What did your time with James Brown teach you? Did the stagecraft, professionalism? I mean, you have to be pretty damn good to be on stage with him in the first place, but did you think that he made you a better player or a more organized player, or it taught you something about the actual craft?
Oh, yes. I mean, in so many ways. I mean, just watching someone of his caliber of performer, you know, to watch how much he gave to every audience, you know, you could not help but learn from that. And specific music advice as well. Like, there's a big part in the book where I talk about him giving me advice on how to do solos, you know. And you know, so there was, like, countless opportunities to learn. Like, I talk about it, like, these days, like, you know, we can only try our best to, like, remember all the things that he taught us and just try to keep some of that in our music and kind of spread that around to the musicians that we get to play with, you know, because he taught us so many things constantly. You know, and one of the things about taking a guitar solo was, you know, you need to breathe. You need to have space. Like, think if you were a saxophone player, you'd have to breathe. You'd have to stop playing at some point. You know, but guitarists, sometimes we play too many notes, you know, and that was one of his pieces of advice was let a solo build like a conversation and leave space and let the audience hear what you said and digest it, and you get to digest it, and you get to think of where to move on from there.
Oh, I like that.
With your next set of notes.
Oh, I like that a lot.
So I mean, if your ears were open, and he used to call it Billy Big Ear, you know, you can really hear what's going down. But if your ears were open and you were paying attention to him, like, you were learning something every single day, you know, and it was constant. He was really great about that.
When you're putting together a book like this, or they're compiling the interviews and all the memories and stuff, is there a particular gig or a particular series of gigs that you could call maybe the high watermark of your time with Mr. Brown and the band?
Yeah, I think it would be, well, there was an October 2003 Japan tour where a lot of things came together, and the band seemed to be at its tightest, and James Brown was energetic and really on point, and the sound was amazing. And I mean, that Japan tour in 2003 is, I will always consider definitely one of the highlights, you know. But, you know, like Europe tour, summer 2004 or 2005, we did some great stuff around then too. So, you know, I think I joined the band about 1999, and I feel like 2002, 2003 was probably around the peak of that, you know, the era that I played with him. I think the band got really tight. I think he was in a good space a lot of the time and having fun, and, you know. So I think you know, people should look for some shows from that area, you know, from that era on YouTube and whatnot. And he was in great form.
And what I mean,
you could go back through his career and find so many different times where he was just peaking. You know what I mean? So he's been great for a long time. We all know that.
What was just what are you up to? What are you up to at the moment? Then, what are you up to at the moment, Damon? What do you do? What fills your days up apart from sort of promoting your book at the moment?
Well, I have my own band that I've had for about 16, 17 years now, which is called Harmonious Junk. But I play with a band called Whitewater Ramble that's based out of Colorado here, and we're working on a new album, and I've been in that band for about 3.5, 4 years. Kind of a bluegrass instrumentation group that also goes into electric instruments and plays all kinds of different styles. And so that's been my main focus band-wise, and that band works quite a bit. And we're going to get more into some more national U.S. touring when we put this album out in around September. But I also give guitar lessons, and I'm actually going out with some of the James Brown band members to Japan this month. We're playing in Tokyo and Osaka on the 1st, 2nd, and 4th of June. So I've got to sort of reunite with some of the James Brown band members. We did some Spain dates last summer, and so that's been a lot of fun as well. So I've got kind of those 4 different things going on.
Fred Wesley was in town in this part of the world, down in southern Spain, a couple of months ago. Unfortunately, I missed that show. What's it like going on stage there with the rest of the members of Mr. Brown's band and Mr. Brown not being there? Do you give yourself a sort of a wry smile and look around just to make sure he's not going to pop backwards through a curtain?
Oh, man, you know, it's like I think we all just wish he was still there. You know, he's still there. He's there in a way, but we wish he was there to sort of, you know, push us in the direction of, you know, making it tighter, you know, because we're used to having, you know, James Brown cueing like every little thing of every show. So now it comes down to 150 cues a night, you know, starts to have to get split up between different band members, you know, and so we can figure out how to do it, but it's way more difficult without him.
Yeah, but I suppose you don't get fined as much.
We don't get fined as much, no. But we don't have him, you know, to make it so tight. So we just have to try to pay extra attention and work together as a team, you know.
The book is cool.
Be happy to see, you know, the band able to carry on and, you know, do our best without him. You know, I think he'd smile down on that kind of thing.
Do you think it's because that's his legacy? Because it doesn't matter when you were born. I mean, everybody's got their famous period of James Brown, be it the 50s, the 60s, the 70s, you know, the 80s. Because the man was such a force of nature, and that's why he carried his music, you know, by force of will and showmanship alone, and that's why he is still recognizable and still an icon.
Oh yeah, I mean, I think someone like him is just timeless. You know, I think 100 years from now, they'll probably be talking about him, you know, more than most other people. I mean, just because he was like a force of nature, you know, like I think, like you said, and yeah, I mean, his music will live forever. His drive and determination and just overall talent. I mean, who in the world has ever had that much talent in that many different areas and in that many different eras, as James Brown. I mean, with the dancing, the singing, the having, 1,000 songs or something, and just doing it for that many decades, I think it's kind of, I don't know if anybody else can compare, or anybody else ever will, really. So it was a great stroke of luck, for me to be able to meet him at all, much less learn from him and work with him and his band members, which is so many great, talented individuals as well.
And the book is called Working for the Man, Playing in the Band, My Years with James Brown. It's out now on ECW Press. Damon, if people want to find out more about you or about the man himself, Mr. Brown, how can they find you? Do you have a website? Is there social media?
Yes, I've got a website for the book called myyearswithjamesbrown.com. And so I'll keep adding, stuff to that and fun stuff, and it'll be kind of an interactive thing. Hopefully try to have some kind of, sort of where is everybody in the band at now, maybe try to do some interviews with some people or, do some video and stuff there. So myyearswithjamesbrown.com. The band that I play in now, whitewaterramble.com. And my own band, Harmonious Chunk. We're on, Damon Wood's Harmonious Chunk on Facebook and stuff like that. So, yep, that's where it's at.
You're easy to find. I just got to ask you this one question because it's something that always gets me. Because you travel around the world, you're doing it, so you're off to Japan and the whole bit, and you must sort of, because of being a musician, you probably hear some good bands and some not so good bands, and some cover bands who are really good and some not so good cover bands. And having worked for Mr. Brown, because I've heard a few people trying to do this, what's it like when you hear a truly appalling version of Sex Machine coming over the speakers?
I don't know, man. I don't encounter too many bands trying to play James Brown that aren't pretty good and funky, So I haven't heard too many people play his music, really badly. So luckily that doesn't happen too much. What happens more is it seems like any place I walk into, James Brown's music is playing. So it's like he follows you for the rest of your life. Once you're in the band. He pops up on the TV. There'll be a comedy skit about him or something, and you just, that happened to us on the road. It would be like, we can't escape this guy. He will follow you.
What a wonderful thought.
It's fun, when you embrace it, it's fun,
What a wonderful thought. You can check out anytime. You can never leave. You're being stalked by the ghost of Mr. Brown himself. The book is called Working for the Man, Playing in the Band, My Years with James Brown. It's by Damon Wood. Damon, thank you so much for your time today.
Oh, thank you. I really appreciate it. It was great. Thanks a lot. It was a lot of fun.